Let's start with the goings-on on Capitol Hill this weekend. We're looking for any signs of progress here as we've seen this standoff between Republicans and Democrats on this funding issue. Do you see any signs of movement here, any progress as we have the president indicating that ICE is going to be at American airports on Monday morning?
Yeah, I'm not sure that that threat is helpful for a couple of reasons. One is that ICE isn't trained to do it. But two, I think we've got the possibility of actually paying TSA, getting a bill passed that would fix that issue and put the funding forward there. There's two options. The Democrats have offered an option. If we can't work something out with respect to ICE, let's just pass a bill that pays everybody else. And I've also seen the Republicans put on the table some agreement potentially to some of the demands that Democrats have made with respect to reforming ICE, although they left off the judicial warrants part. The one thing that the Constitution actually requires they didn't have in the version that I saw. But I think there's a chance to fix this. Sending ICE to the airports, if he wants to do it, fine. If he doesn't, fine. I think the biggest way to fix this, though, is just to pass the legislation to pay them.
Is there any fear, during the last shutdown, Democrats stood on principle and basically lost? I mean, had to give in, or some members of the party gave in, and then it was seen as a political loss. Is there any concern that history might repeat itself here, especially as if the situation at airports get worse and the American public really starts to make noise about how this is impacting their daily lives?
Well, first of all, let me disagree that it was a loss. I didn't agree with my Senate colleagues who agreed to move forward without getting the actual adjustment for the ACA tax credits. But I think Democrats in the House certainly made the point, and Americans who had their premiums double and triple or quadruple fully understand now that it's totally on the Republicans. Trump and Republicans in Congress refuse to do any kind of extension, even a short-term one, try and figure out a way to keep their premiums from jumping. Those Americans, and there's millions of them, are paying the price for that now. With respect to the ICE issue, I think it's kind of the same thing. ICE had been solidified in the public mind as a major problem with respect to the Trump administration. They wanted the border closed down, but they didn't want people getting shot in the face and, killed for exercising their First Amendment rights. And they didn't like people getting dragged out of their cars and windshields shattered and teacher aides and gardeners and waitresses getting arrested. They didn't want any of that stuff. And I think we saw that in Minnesota. So I think at the end of the day, we were going to make sure we hold on and get as many of these issues addressed with respect to ICE, because they're out of control and people are dying they died on the streets, and they're dying in custody in some ways because ICE is not trained to do what they're doing right now, and it shows.
Let's shift our focus here to the ongoing war in the Middle East. And we've seen the Pentagon indicate that they're going to request $200 billion for this war. That number could shift a little bit, but still an extraordinary amount of money, about a third of the Pentagon's budget, the equivalent of that. I'm curious what your appetite is for a request like that, how you think that's going to go down on Capitol Hill. I did note that Senator John Kennedy noted he would not go along with that without some more hearings on strategy in the course of this war. How is this resonating around the other House of Congress, around the House of Representatives?
I mean, I've got zero appetite for that. $200 billion, and the fact that he's got Marines heading over there right now strongly suggests he's looking at putting boots on the ground. And instead of trying to wrap this up quickly, is looking at the long-term type of quagmire that I think we all want to avoid. So I have zero interest in that. And $200 billion, you're right, that's a whole lot of money and could have funded, for example, the ACA tax credit extension we were just talking about a moment ago. And some of the other major issues with respect to SNAP benefits and the like. So I think it's way off track. I think it's a number that doesn't make any sense, especially given some of the stated goals. They haven't actually landed on what the mission is. And I think they need to come back to Congress if they really want to have an extended war. Let's have the War Powers Act debate, and let's have a real one this time and have an actual vote to see if the American people really have an appetite for that. So far, they don't. And they've made no effort, Trump administration's made no effort to persuade the American people, and that's showing. And as the gas prices get higher, the American people are going to get even less appetite for this.
Congressman, I want to ask you about war powers, because even if Republicans and Democrats agree that they didn't want the president to go forward anymore with this military mission, realistically, is there anything Congress can do to stop the president if he wants to launch a war in Iran or Cuba or anywhere else he decides?
Well, funding is a big part. We control the power of the purse, and that's what the $200 billion request is about. And public opinion is another big piece, too. I think he's really swimming upstream on this one from a public opinion standpoint. The gas prices in my area were about $2.95 or so like a month ago. Now they're getting almost to $4. And, you layer that on top of the increasing in high prices for groceries due to the tariffs he's put on top of that, the healthcare credits expiring, and we just talked about that a moment ago, electricity prices, the affordability crisis that's been spawned almost entirely by the Trump administration is really starting to wear on the American people and undermine. His MAGA base is fine, but the independents are the ones that are going to drive the midterm elections. And he's way underwater with them, and the Republican Party is increasingly too. So I think you might start seeing some defections from Republicans in Congress because they're going to be worried about getting reelected in November.
Last question I have for you about the war centers on the way that we've seen it waged thus far. Yes, there have been a lot of kind of the legacy ballistic missiles that we've seen deployed in the past, but we've seen so many drones being used, so much emphasis on AI warfare going forward here. I know that's something of interest to you, research work that's being done in your district on AI and quantum computing. How well positioned is the U.S. to embark on this new kind of warfare as we've seen it play out, yes, in Iran, across the Middle East, but also in Ukraine as well?
To be frank, I think we've been caught a little flat-footed on this. The drone issue, if we'd been paying close attention to what's going on in Ukraine and the fact that Iran started supplying drones to Russia in the middle of that, we would have been doing more, I think, to upgrade our ability, not just to build drones and have them ready for ourselves, but for countermeasures. So right now what we're looking at is drone attacks by Iran, where, their drones cost like $20,000 for very sophisticated ones. We're using, anti-measures that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even $1 million each. So it's certainly not cost effective. And I think, we've missed the chance to try and have countermeasures that are more affordable and allow us to be more sustained in protecting ourselves and our allies. And I think that's showing right now. So hopefully we can turn the corner on that relatively quickly. And I think add in the efforts with respect to AI and quantum and the like. Trump administration's really attacked science and technology a lot in the United States, certainly the university and research level. We've got to turn that around. China's pushing engineers and scientists towards these projects by the thousands. We've been cutting back. We can't afford to do that if we're going to stay competitive with China.